You just paid $2 for a bottle of water and you trusted it. You held it up to the light, you saw it look crystal clear, and you believed clean. But clear is not the same as clean. Here is the claim I want you to sit with. Some of the most expensive bottled water on the shelf carries more hidden plastic than the tap you were told to avoid, and the way to fix your own water at home was solved over 1,000 years ago with an object you can hold in one hand. That knowledge did not vanish by accident. It was replaced by something more profitable to sell you. I spent 2 years chasing this. I read a study out of Columbia University from January of 2024 that stopped me cold, and I dug all the way back to a healing practice written down in India centuries ago, and by the end of this you will know how to make water safer this weekend with something already sitting in your kitchen. I still remember standing in a gas station outside Bakersfield, 98 degrees, staring at a cooler wall of 12 different brands, having no earthly idea which one was actually safe. I bought the one with a mountain on the label. That mountain, it turns out, meant nothing. So let me hand you what I found. The way an old neighbor hands you a tool across the fence and says, "Keep it, you will need this." Let me start with the thing that made me distrust the whole shelf. I always assumed bottled water was regulated harder than tap water. It felt cleaner, it cost more, so surely someone was watching it closer. That assumption is exactly backwards. In the United States, tap water is regulated by the Environmental Protection Agency, and public utilities are required to test constantly and publish the results where anyone can read them. Bottled water falls under the Food and Drug Administration, and here is the part almost nobody tells you. If a company bottles water and sells it inside the same state, in many cases it can slip outside the strictest federal testing rules entirely. Think about what that means. The water you assumed was the gold standard can face less public scrutiny than the water coming out of your faucet for a fraction of a penny. And in 2018, a group called Orb Media worked with researchers at the State University of New York and tested 259 bottles from 11 brands across 9 countries. They found tiny plastic particles in 93% of them, 93 out of every 100 bottles. Not the cheap ones only, the famous ones too, the ones with the glaciers and the springs and the soft blue labels. So when I looked at that cooler wall in Bakersfield, I was not looking at 15 levels of purity. I was looking at 15 levels of marketing. But microplastic particles were only the surface of it, because a newer study took a much sharper look, and what it counted was far worse than anyone expected. Here is where my stomach dropped. For years, the plastic in bottled water was measured in pieces big enough to catch with older equipment. Those were called microplastics. But there is a smaller category called nanoplastics. Particles so small they can pass out of your gut and into your bloodstream, small enough in theory to reach your organs. Nobody could count them properly because nobody had the tools. Then in January of 2024, researchers at Columbia University and Rutgers University published something in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. They built a new laser-based method to actually see and count these nanoplastics. They tested popular bottled water brands sold right here in America. And in a single liter of bottled water, roughly the size of the big bottle you buy without thinking, they found on average around 240,000 plastic fragments. 240,000. In 1 liter. That number was somewhere between 10 and 100 times higher than earlier studies had ever estimated, because earlier studies simply could not see the smallest pieces. Now, I am not here to scare you into paralysis. And I want to be honest, because that is the whole reason you should trust me. Science has not yet proven exactly what all these particles do inside a human body over decades. That research is still being done. But here is the plain sense part that no scientist argues with. Those particles are coming largely from the plastic bottle itself and its cap, especially when the bottle gets squeezed, heated in a hot car, or sits for months on a warm shelf. which means the container you trusted to protect the water is quietly shedding into it. I remember pulling a warm bottle out of my truck that same summer and drinking it without a second thought. Now I picture that laser count and I cannot unknow it. So the obvious question becomes, if only a handful of these brands are genuinely clean, how do you tell them apart, and why has nobody handed you a simple way to check for yourself? And that is exactly where this stops being a story about fear and starts being a story about power, your power. Because there is a number you can measure at home that the industry would rather you never think about. Let me tell you about the little tool that changed how I shop. There is a measurement called total dissolved solids, and people in the know just call it TDS. It counts the dissolved minerals, salts, and metals in your water, measured in parts per million. It does not catch everything, and I will be straight with you about its limits in a moment. But it tells you something the label never will. It tells you what is actually floating in that water beyond the pretty word natural. You can buy a small handheld TDS meter, the kind that looks like a fat pen, for around $15. I bought mine skeptical, fully expecting a gimmick. Then I started dipping it into everything in my house. Here is what surprised me. Some premium bottled waters read astonishingly low, almost nothing dissolved, because they were purified so aggressively that even the good minerals your body wants were stripped out. Others, sold as pure spring water, read higher than my own tap. And a few tap samples in my town came out cleaner on that meter than water I'd been paying $2 a bottle for. Now, the World Health Organization has said for years that water under about 300 parts per million is generally considered good, and many people find water tastes best somewhere between roughly 50 and 150. That is a real published benchmark, not something I invented. So for $15, one time, you gain the ability to walk your own kitchen and rank every source of water you own. But here is my honest warning, because a neighbor who only tells you the good part is not a friend. A TDS meter does not detect bacteria, it does not detect most of those nanoplastic particles, and it does not catch every chemical. A low reading is not a certificate of safety. What it does give you is a starting map. It ends the blindness. It lets you stop guessing and start measuring, and once you can measure, no label can lie to you as easily again. When I first understood that, I felt something I had not felt in the water aisle in years. I felt in control, but controlling what you can measure only raised a bigger question in my mind. If the bottle itself is part of the problem, then buying different bottles is not a real escape. The real answer had to be older than plastic entirely. And that hunt is what led me back 100 years to people who had no bottles at all and still drank cleaner than we do. So I started reading the old books, not internet posts. Actual household manuals from before refrigeration was common, the kind of thrift and home economy guides written when wasting anything could genuinely hurt your family. And what struck me was the confidence in them. These writers did not fear their water because they understood their water. They knew where it came from, they knew how to settle it, filter it, and store it, and they did it all without a single factory involved. In home manuals from the early 1900s, families were taught to filter cloudy water through layers of clean sand and charcoal packed into a barrel. Charcoal, not a fancy branded cartridge, but the same principle your expensive filter pitcher uses today. Activated carbon, which is charcoal treated to become incredibly porous, works by grabbing certain chemicals and odors as water passes through it. The pitcher on your counter is selling you a 100-year-old idea in a plastic shell with a subscription. And this is the moment the story turned for me from surprise into something closer to quiet anger, because I started to see a pattern across everything I was reading. Every single problem the bottled water industry sells you a solution for, our grandparents and their grandparents solved with materials that cost almost nothing: sand, charcoal, cloth, sunlight, certain metals, time, and gravity. So how did we get here? How did people who filtered their own water in a barrel become people who pay more per gallon for water than for gasoline? The answer is not a mystery, and it is not really a conspiracy in the cloak and dagger sense. It is simpler, and honestly, more insulting than that. Somewhere in the last several decades, convenience got sold to us as safety, and self-reliance got quietly reframed as something poor or backward. A whole industry realized there was more money in a problem you rent forever than in a solution you own once. If you know how to clean your own water, you buy nothing, month after month, year after year. If you are afraid of your own faucet, you buy bottles until the day you die. The global bottled water business is now worth hundreds of billions of dollars a year. That entire fortune rests on one feeling, the feeling that you cannot trust water unless a corporation hands it to you sealed. Our great-grandparents would have found that idea baffling. And once I saw it that way, I could not stop seeing it. But knowing you have been sold a feeling is not enough. You need the methods back. So let me start handing them to you one by one, the way they were handed down before anyone thought to charge for them. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now, because I thought it too. You are thinking this sounds like it needs money, or special equipment, or a big house with a garage full of supplies, and you are sitting there with an apartment and a tight budget and a faucet you are not sure about. This next part is for you, specifically. I am not going to send you shopping. I am going to show you what you can do tonight with things you almost certainly already own for nothing. Start with the simplest forgotten trick of all. Let your water rest. Much of the harsh chlorine taste and smell in tap water is not permanent. Chlorine is a gas dissolved into the water at the treatment plant to keep it safe on its journey to you, and it naturally wants to escape back into the air. If you fill an open pitcher and simply let it stand uncovered on the counter for a full day, a large share of that chlorine will off-gas and leave on its own. Our grandparents did this without thinking. Setting a jug by the window, the water tastes softer, rounder, less like a swimming pool, and it costs you nothing but patience. Put it in the refrigerator after it is rested, and the cold hides even more of what is left. That feeling of control is exactly what I wanted to build on when I put together the book Smart Basics, and if you want to go deeper than one video allows, it is linked in the description below. Smart Basics, Deep Frugal, and System Complete are 3 levels of the same idea. The practical knowledge that convenience culture quietly replaced, laid out so you can use it the same day you read it. If what we have covered so far has resonated with you, the book picks up right where this leaves off and goes further into the methods, the measurements, and the reasoning behind all of it. Take a look in the description when the video ends, and now let me bring you back to the question that was sitting in my mind next. Next, the cloth. If your water ever runs cloudy, from old pipes, from work being done on the line, from a well after heavy rain, you do not need to panic and run to the store. Fold a clean cotton cloth. A piece of an old bed sheet works, 4 or more layers thick, and pour the water through it slowly into a clean jar. This will not remove dissolved chemicals or germs, and I will never pretend it does, but it lifts out the sediment and grit that make water unpleasant and that can shield bacteria from other treatment. In much of the world, this simple cloth folding is still taught as a real public health step because it genuinely reduces the junk in the water before any deeper cleaning. Now the one that feels almost too simple to be real, and yet it is backed by decades of serious science. Sunlight. There is a method public health workers call solar disinfection, and it was developed and tested heavily starting in the 1980s and refined through the 1990s by researchers, including a Swiss Institute for Water Research, and studied by the World Health Organization for use in places without reliable clean water. Here is the method. You take clear water, already filtered through cloth if it is cloudy, and you fill a clear bottle. You lay that bottle on its side in full, direct sunlight for at least 6 hours on a bright day. The ultraviolet rays from the sun, combined with the heat, damage the germs in the water so they can no longer make you sick. Field studies across multiple countries found this measurably reduced the kind of bacteria that cause diarrhea and disease. Think about that. A closed bottle, 6 hours of sun, a method proven in real communities. Free. I tested every one of these myself, one at a time, because I did not want to hand you anything I had not held in my own hands. The rested water genuinely tasted better. The cloth pulled visible cloud out of a bad sample. And when I let a clear bottle sit in the summer sun on my porch railing, I understood that people with almost nothing had been drinking safely for as long as the sun has been shining. But here is where I have to be the honest neighbor again. Because none of these free methods, by themselves, remove those nanoplastic particles or heavy metals like lead. They are powerful, they are real, and they were enough to keep whole generations alive. Yet the deeper I dug, the more I realized the very best of the old knowledge was not about scrambling to fix bad water at all. It was about storing water in a way that actively cleaned itself. And that idea sounded like superstition to me, right up until I found the study that proved it. Let me tell you about the object that broke my skepticism completely, because I want you to know I did not believe this one at first. When I first read that certain metal containers could purify water simply by holding it, I rolled my eyes. It sounded like the kind of folk claim that falls apart the moment anyone tests it. So I went looking to debunk it. Instead, I found the science that made me a believer, and I found a tradition far older than any laboratory. Go back more than 1,000 years into the traditional medicine of India, the system called Ayurveda. In those texts, there is a specific practice with a specific name, Tamra Jal. It translates roughly to copper water. The instruction was precise: store your drinking water in a vessel made of pure copper, overnight, for at least 8 hours, and drink it in the morning. This was not casual advice. It was treated as a genuine health practice, passed down through countless generations, from grandmother to mother to child, in millions of homes. For most of modern history, Western science shrugged at this. Nice folklore, no proof. Then researchers decided to actually test it. And I want to give you the real citation, because this is the buried document that changed my mind. In the year 2012, a study was published in the Journal of Health, Population, and Nutrition. Researchers deliberately took water and contaminated it with dangerous bacteria, the kinds that cause serious diarrheal disease, the same categories of germs that kill people in places without clean water. Then they stored that contaminated water in copper pots at room temperature. After 16 hours, they went looking for the bacteria they had put in. They could not find them. The harmful bacteria had dropped to levels the tests could no longer even detect. The copper itself had done the killing. Scientists call it the oligodynamic effect, a real and documented property where tiny amounts of certain metals, copper especially, are toxic to bacteria and other microbes. A trace of copper leaches into the water, far too little to hurt you, but more than enough to destroy the germs living in it. Sit with the size of that. 1,000-year-old practice, dismissed as superstition, walks into a modern laboratory and passes the test. The grandmothers were right. The instruction they repeated without knowing the chemistry was, all along, sound science. And here is what makes this the secret I most wanted to hand you. A pure copper vessel is a thing you buy once, not monthly, once. There is no cartridge, no subscription, no expiration, no plastic shedding into your water. You fill it at night, you let it sit while you sleep, and in the morning you have water that a peer-reviewed study showed can neutralize dangerous bacteria using nothing but the metal and time. Now let me be the careful neighbor one more time, because I respect you too much to oversell. Copper storage targets bacteria. It is not designed to pull out heavy metals or those plastic nanoparticles, so it is not a magic cure for every single thing in water. It must be genuinely pure copper, kept clean, And if you have a specific medical condition, you always check with your doctor first. But as a way to safely store and biologically clean your drinking water, owned outright for the rest of your life, it is one of the most elegant things I have ever come across. The industry cannot sell you a forever bottle. It needs you buying again next week. And copper was only the doorway, because once I understood that the old world stored water in things that cleaned it, I found another purifier even more astonishing, and this one grows on a tree. I promised you the finale would be something you have never heard, so here it is. In parts of Africa and South Asia, for centuries, people living beside muddy rivers faced a brutal problem. Their only water was thick and brown, full of sediment and disease. They had no charcoal barrels, no sand filters, no factories. What they had was a tree, the moringa tree, sometimes called the drumstick tree. Here is what they discovered, and what science has now confirmed in detail. If you take the mature seeds of the moringa tree, dry them, remove the shells, and crush the white kernels into a fine powder, that powder does something remarkable when stirred into dirty water. The crushed seed contains a natural protein that carries a positive electrical charge. The dirt, the sediment, and many bacteria in water carry a negative charge. The protein grabs onto them, binds them together into heavy clumps, and those clumps sink to the bottom, dragging the filth down with them. You pour off the clear water from the top. This is not a fringe idea. Researchers, including scientists connected to universities studying it as far back as the 1970s and studied more deeply since, have measured moringa seed powder, removing a large majority of the suspended particles and dramatically reducing the bacteria in turbid water. Some studies reported bacterial reductions in the range of 90 to over 99% under the right conditions. A tree seed. Doing the work of a treatment plant, think about the whole arc of what you now hold. The knowledge existed. Ancient people filtered through sand and cloth. They set water in the sun. They stored it in copper. They clarified it with the seed of a tree. And they did all of it without spending a fortune or trusting a single corporation. That knowledge was real, and it worked, and it kept human beings alive for thousands of years. Then it was pushed aside, not because it stopped working, but because there was no money in a method you already own. Convenience arrived wrapped in plastic, wearing a picture of a mountain, and it whispered that the old ways were dirty and the new ways were safe, when the truth, as a laser at Columbia University counted out in 2024, is far more complicated than that. And yet the knowledge did not die. It survived in old household manuals gathering dust. It survived in a study printed in 2012 that almost nobody read. It survived in grandmothers who kept filling copper pots even when their grandchildren laughed. It survived because a few people refused to let it go. And now, it is in your hands. That is the whole point of everything I do. These methods were not lost. They were merely set down, waiting for someone curious enough to pick them back up and carry them to you. You started this by paying $2 for a bottle and trusting a picture. You are ending it as a person who can measure, filter, and store your own water using knowledge 1,000 years deep. Nobody can sell you your own fear quite so easily anymore. Something that was quietly taken from all of us, the plain confidence to handle our own water, just came back to you. And that is really who you are, isn't it? You are not the kind of person who is content to keep paying forever for something you were fully capable of understanding all along. You would rather know a thing once than rent it for life. That instinct, that stubborn refusal to stay helpless, is the most valuable thing you own, and no label can take it from you. So let me ask you something, and I genuinely want your answer. Have you ever used a TDS meter on your own tap water, and what number did it give you? Or was there a method your own grandparents used, something with cloth or sunlight or a certain pot that you had almost forgotten until right now? Tell me in the comments. I read them, and I learn from you as much as you learn from me, and tell me where in the world you are watching from, because these old methods came from everywhere. If any of this reached you, understand what you are actually joining. This is a growing group of people quietly reclaiming the practical knowledge that convenience culture tried to charge us for. Not customers, rememberers. Stay with me, because the next thing I am pulling out of these old manuals is a way people kept food cold and fresh for weeks, long before anyone owned a refrigerator, using only clay, water, and the physics of evaporation. It works. I tested it, and once you see it, you will never look at your electric bill the same way again. Keep the tools I handed you. You are going to need them. Before you go, one last thing. This video gave the overview, but inside the Old Ways Almanac, I show you the safe brands in that 1,000-year-old water fix, right where this left off. In there you can ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. Never a machine. You won't be alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen, cancel anytime with one click, no risk. If this helped you drink a little safer, stay with me. I have more simple guides right here to protect you and your family. So please subscribe and look around.